Why are we discussing today impact evaluation? Impact evaluation plays a very significant role in driving accountability, learning, and evidence-based support for policies, interventions in social and development sector. Impact evaluation, you want to give a theoretical definition. Asian Development Bank says impact evaluation are empirical studies. Empirical studies are studies which you get data from direct observation that quantify the causal effects of interventions on outcomes of interest. When we talk about impact evaluation, when we talk about evidence-based approach, whatever policies and interventions which you want to take or drive in the social and development sector specifically, what sort of effect they have, do they really have the effect which is intended? Do they fulfill the mission? So these are some of the questions. It gives a very good learning perspective. We are able to understand how those policies and what are the basically effect of those policies in the development sector. One way, of course, is to check and measure the difference between the intervention when you are given and the counterfactual. So we'll understand what we mean by counterfactual. It's very important. It's one of the backbone of a lot of studies, specifically in randomized controlled trials, which you call RCTs. Impact evaluation is used in social sciences. Usually a lot of impact evaluation long-term oriented. However, you can also have short-term and medium-term. To give you an idea, if you see the graph is just going up, it's number of studies published annually on that particular subject. See how much I had the data for 2015, and we see that it's rising in an exponential manner. So what is counterfactual? It is when you're going to be implementing a policy, you want to know how effective that policy had been. When you want to compare it, you want to see what happened if there was no intervention compared to what would have happened if there was an intervention. Is how have you made that difference? And that is actually the calculation of impact. This is what I was talking about. Let's say you are measuring an outcome and you are measuring it over a period of time. And that period of time could be depending on your project. YT, an intervention is given. To YT, the change would go to observation. T+1 would be at the time when you want to observe basically the impact. Output of the intervention is y1 t+1. If there was no intervention given, the output would be y0 t+1. Impact is the difference between y1 t+1 minus y0 t+1, which is what would be the effect if there was no intervention given, which is known as the counterfactual. It's very difficult to measure the counterfactual at the same time as you're observing the results of the intervention. This is why there is something known as RCT, which I talked about, randomized controlled trials, which delivers a mechanism where you can to measure the difference between counterfactual and the observation of the intervention. Also have quasi-experiments. Impact evaluation module goes in tandem in statistics and regression, because those are the tools which you are going to be using. Concepts of statistics and regression are very important, and other concepts come out as and when it is required. Example, these are some of the questions you could be asking in impact evaluation. A city has built a 4-lane highway between the city center and a suburb. The questions could be the impact of the economic development on the local community. Did building the highway achieve the stated goals? It would be like, was there a reduction of carbon emissions due to the increase in the efficiency of the transportation? So this is in terms of priority. Like first, of course, is what was the economic impact, and then you're looking at what is on the climate. And third, on an even broader role, that what actually did it go with in tune with the national policy. So when we talk about impact evaluation, what are the cycle? First is basically we strategize. We'll also come to theory of change. We need to have a clear-cut objective. Basically, what do we want in the outcome? The outcomes usually are long-term. To be as clear as possible, we need to have a timeline and a budget. These are very important things when you start with, because your clear-cut objective would define what is your timeline and budget. And these things are going to define what you're going to be doing going forward, how you're going to be planning the project. Clearly communicate your mission to all the actors. There'll be a lot of actors involved, so that you should be absolutely clear on what you want to do. This is the time we're going to be. Second stage is you set up the experiment and intervention. Need to understand the scope of the intervention. Is it going towards the long-term part of your vision, what you want to accomplish, or in the short term or the medium terms? What are these interventions? How are you going to plan out? Have a monitoring system. You need indicators to look at the outcomes or preconditions, which are smaller outcomes, then the final outcome. Look at external factors. You need to have a fair understanding of what the political regulatory environment is, because this is going to play a huge role as a driver for what you want to do. You will then have to set up a system. There are multiple actors who are going to be playing the role in impact evaluation cycle. There could be consultants whom you hire from outside who are experts in terms of research. It depends, the technical part is being done in-house or who's going to be doing it. So you need to have everybody on the same page. Then is the implementation, which requires field visit, collect baseline data. So what we mean by baseline data is the data which you are going to be collecting from the sample or from the group which you want to do an intervention. Ultimately, this is the time which is going to happen. The baseline data is done before you carry out the intervention experiment or the policy initiative which you want to take. You need to also have a very strong coordination among various actors. It's very important. This is going to be a multi-part when you're going to be implementing a project. Last is, of course, you come to analysis and report generation. You want to collect the endline data. Basically, endline data will be data on the sample or on the population which we have conducted the intervention, and it's already taken results. So when you collect the data when you had an intended and you want to see what is the result of the intervention, then you do is conduct impact analysis and publish the findings. Here we'll try to understand, as I spoke about, an inline survey is run after a program's benefit are expected to have materialized. So whatever the programmer wanted to do about the intervention, it's already materialized. And when you want to compare, you compare the outcome which was at the beginning and the end, which was to show what changed during the intervention. So theory of change. We're talking about intervention. These are basic policy changes, or for example, if you want to eradicate the disease among children or babies, let's be going through a free immunization process. It could be camps or door to door. These are the interventions. Theory of change plays a major part in impact evaluation. It's basically a strategic decision making tool, social sciences, to find solutions to complex problems. Usually it's planned out for long term, and we'll look at it in detail. It'll be great if you read the Application Community Builders Approach to Theory of Change, a practical guide to theory development. It was written by Andrea Anderson from the prestigious Aspen Institute. It's one of the leading think tanks and institutes in the development sector. When we talk about theory of change, how to have a pathway, series of steps. Works is a way of backwards mapping. That is, you look at the end result. You look at the end result, how you're going to map it. Once you have the end result, what you want to achieve it, then you can go back and set your objective. So it could be a process or a product, and it's actually driven in terms of, it's a long-term process, but it could be driven in short phases. It could be short-term, medium-term, and you should have indicators all this time. Talk about assumptions, which plays a very important role. When we look at, you'll have pathways, and we are making a pathway for theory of change to change something in the long term. You always have certain assumptions. Once you have an objective, you take certain assumptions. So when you're assuming, what it means that X is going to affect Y, which is like if X, then Y outcome will happen. One of the fallacies which usually people do is, like, they say if not X, then not Y, which is not true. If when you're looking at critical reasoning, and this plays a very important role also in aptitude tests, if X then Y, then the right form is if not Y, then not X. This is how the assumptions work in.